Okay, so today we're going to do a technical portion again. We seem to have flip-flopped from what we did before the break, so we'll just kind of retain that for a second. And today, well, last time, historically, we looked at Joran Rudy and Bill Alves, both working with sort of 3D softwares to create the visual scene. And then Bill Alves very specifically with C-Sound, Joran Rudy, kind of a mixed bag of things from the 90s, which is an interesting conversation in itself, but he's using tools to create what he creates. And all of that's very time consuming and different than it is now. And so what we'll do today, we're gonna create scenes with lights. So looking at 3D scenes and how lighting is done, which a little bit of a disclaimer, I'm not an absolute expert in that area. I can do it, but sometimes I myself even get confused. And part of the reason for that is that lights in an OpenGL scene or in a visual scene like we're working in do not work like lights in the real world. They are an approximation, and it's mostly okay at best. And it runs in real time. So that's the nice part of it. There are other types of ways to do lighting in post-processing. So if we were able to take the output of our world and run it through a shader or two, we might be able to do things like volumetric lighting to really get some more, maybe what we're used to with looking at a lighting scene in games and so forth. But for now, we'll just look at how it is that we can create lights in a scene. All right, so let me download. I put a patch up today that I'll try to get through. I'll try to rebuild it, is what I mean. But for all of our sakes, I tried to organize it.
I have a question. When we study sound, we always start like understanding how is it that our ears perceive sound, and the frequency range and all that. But with light, what would be like a good source or a good name for understanding how the eyes see light, or how is that even called? Like our perception of vision.
Yeah, that perception of vision or vision perception, or I think most of the time when we're talking about visual things, we're really talking about light. Right, so we don't see anything without light. And so as sound is really just the study of air pressure vibrations at some level, this is, the study of vision is really the study of light. But the way our eyes work deals with rods and cones and things like that. That's how our eyes deal with light. I don't really know. I've never taken a course in whatever you would call the visual equivalent of psychoacoustics.
Mm-hmm. But then we have the frequency spectrum of light too, which is to the colors we can see.
That's right. Yeah, which is a small spectrum of all available waves.
Waves.
Yeah, and it should be clear that light waves are not like sound waves.
Oh yeah.
Right. They're not like that. They travel through a vacuum to arrive at us from the sun. Okay, so that's a good question. I don't have a really good source for you or a good answer.
It's okay. I'm sure there's a lot of information out there about it.
There is. I'd be curious to know what the term is that's equivalent to psychoacoustic. Because there is the essence of light in the world, and then there's the essence of light as we perceive it. And also it reminds me of some art I saw where the way in which other creatures see was represented. It's far different than ours, obviously. Sight being a very fundamental part of evolving towards something that can survive in the world. So just like some creatures can hear, different frequencies than we can, the same goes for light. All right, so let me show you what we're looking at today. There's a few things here, and I'll try to get to them. But namely is I'm trying to deal with light here, but I did end up doing some other things. So here's our scene. You know, it's a duck on stage. And you can see that we have some lights shining on these planes, and it actually goes through the planes. And if I were to rotate this scene around, you can see that there's actually an encompassing sphere. So we see the light hitting the sphere up there. And then I have a light going on the bottom here, a green spotlight that goes through the bottom of these things. I don't know if you can see that. And it hits the top of the sphere. And some of the lights I have represented with these little spheres. So this is the spotlight for the duck stage. And this is a point light. You know, that's a point light. Okay, so all of this to, and we can move the duck up and down. It's pretty important to be able to do that. So, you know, the duck can be here, and then it's on a different stage, sort of the lower club stage, and then we can move the duck up onto the main stage, and we can see the spotlight shine upon him. Okay, it took me a long time to make this. All right, so that's the notion. Let me just walk through a few things that are in this patch before we start kind of creating from scratch. So there's different types of lights in jitter and in OpenGL in general. But for us, there's basically three types of lights. There's directional lights, and those are the lights that oddly you wouldn't be able to tell which direction they came from. So right now, the reason you're able to see me mostly is because of directional light, like from the sun. And it bounces around so much that we can't even tell where it came from, right? It just lights up the room. It doesn't have a particular location, it seems like. It's like the sun. And then there are spotlights, which are like a cone of light. So we know what spotlights are. And then there's point lights, which would be something more like a lamp, right? That just kind of radiates out. So those are the three types of lights we deal with. Generally, you know, you can light up a whole scene with the directional light. And then I don't believe I'm using any directional lights in this scene. I could be wrong. I don't think I am. So here, everything's being lit up by the point light. And I also had, let me finish up. I got to load a couple materials here. So I say not the duck. Oh, well, that's a shame. It looks like I did not save the right one here. Well, I can just do it now, I guess. That's interesting. Oh, that's really funny. I mean, that I don't have. It was late last night, I guess. Jit.gl material. So I'm actually missing a couple things from here, but that's okay. And we could, for example, put this on the top and bottom planes as I had it before. And this is going to reveal something. These are actually flipped upside down. There we go. And we can change the material that is on there to be something like, you know, pavement or something like that. So we've got these different concepts of lights, spotlight, directional, point light, materials. You know, what is that? We have objects have these ways they respond to light, which are diffuse, specular, ambient, and emission. So we'll have to talk a little bit about what that means. So we have types of lights, and then we have types of ways objects respond to light, how they respond to different ideas about light, I suppose. There's a camera in the space, which I think we've dealt with a little bit. I don't use it here, but to just position us, but we could move around, I think. Ooh, that was pretty awful. So we could move the camera around here. I'm moving it in a circle. There's upside down duck. And then interestingly, I've grouped things hierarchically through a parent group. So that'll be the last thing I get to if I can get to it. But that's why I'm able to rotate the duck, the planes, the lights, and everything else with a single rotation command. Because I've grouped those all in this node. That's the easiest way to explain that, although that does other things as well. Okay, so let's start anew. I will just save this. Oh, I remember now that I actually saved a 2A on my desktop, and that's the one that I failed to upload correctly. All right, and we'll start new.
Do you recommend us to go along with you or to just watch?
I think for this one, if you can go along with me, that's fine. If you want to just watch and then do it later, that's a thing as well. I'll try to go slowly, but I understand for some people when you don't have a second monitor, this becomes really difficult. So it's up to you. I will try to go slowly enough. I think sometimes working along is good because you run into issues that you need to solve, and I don't mind that. So first we create the world, and I will name this light space. And that's all the information I need for this. And we can turn on the world. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is the idea, right, is that I will create a plane that has 3 lights, spotlights on it. So this deals with, we have to think about in our minds, or we have to draw it out on paper, what we're trying to do. Because sometimes that can become difficult. But this is pretty simple, that I would like to have a plane that is either directly in front of me, or in the case of what I created before, that lies flat in the world here. And I'm going to need a camera to look at it from a certain place. So I'm just going to go ahead and create my camera. So jit.gl.camera in the light space. And I just happen to know that I want this positioned at 0 on the X, so in the middle, and then up 5 on the Y, and then up back 8 on the Z. So we're kind of looking down this way. So I'll be able to see the plane. And I'm going to put the look at command here for the camera as well. So always just look at the middle of the space. So this position and look at are very important. And often when you change the position, you have to, again, change the look at if you want to keep looking at the same spot. So if you change the position, you may need to also send the look at message again if you would like to not have the camera. That's one way to do it, to not have the camera look in a different direction than you want. So there's our camera. It's not looking at anything right now because we have nothing in the world. So what we said we wanted to do is to create a jit.gl. Well, we wanted to create a plane. And so there's numerous ways to do that. I'm going to use the grid shape. And one of the reasons I will use the grid shape is because the grid shape automatically comes with some features that let it respond to light. And namely, those features are normals. And I'll turn lighting enable on for now, I think. All right, so there's a plane in the space, and I actually want to rotate this so that it lays flat. And one way to do that is positive 90, so rotate it one direction, or you can rotate it the other direction. It turns out that to have the direction that's actually going to respond well to light, we would rotate this by negative 90 degrees. On the x-axis. So if the x-axis is running this way, we're flipping it around that axis, right? So if you imagine sticking a pole through the plane, and then we're like a skewer and we're rotating it on the barbecue, that's what we're doing here. Okay, so there's my plane kind of laying flat. There is no light in the space. So what is a normal then? So a normal is something that says which way the surfaces point. So what is perpendicular to the surface? So in a sphere, in a ball, the surfaces all have to point away from the center in such a way that that a vector would run perpendicular to that surface. It is how a scene knows how light bounces off of stuff. So if you don't have any normals, there is no information about how light should bounce off of your object. So if you were to send something directly to the render space, like we did in the very beginning with some sort of quad grid command or something like that, I think that what happens is that the scene will do its best to make normals for you. And so, the mesh object has an auto normals sort of thing, or it will try to make normals for you based on the shape. Obviously, calculating what is perpendicular to a surface can be complicated if your shape is not simple. So oftentimes people make their own sort of normal matrix. But at the same time, I don't do that. And one way to deal with that is to deal with a material, which we'll look at later, which is another way to allow an object to respond to not only to respond to light in specific ways, different types of light, and provide the normal that allows you to do that in an intelligent way. All right, so we have our plane, we have lighting enabled on. The idea here is that, I'm going to look at I'm going to see what size I made the plane in this other one. The planes. Oh, I scaled it to be twice as big. So I'm going to do that here as well. So you'll notice here, that's a little shortcut that I use, that you don't actually have to supply all three scale numbers. You can just supply one and it'll automatically go out to all three. So a little shortcut. All right, so here's our plane, and the idea is I want to create a plane that has 3 spotlights on it. So the first thing to do is to make one spotlight. And the way we can make a light or multiple lights in GL or in jitter is with the jit.gl.light. Again, it's in the render space light space, and it might want to know where it's positioned as well. So we want to place this above the plane, and I'll say we're right in the center on the X. And then to be above the plane, let's go up 3 for now. And then we're also centered on the Z axis. So the position is 0, 3, 0. And the type of light here, the light type is going to be a spotlight. And what we're going to be dealing with is the diffuse lighting setting. So this is how an object responds to light. How do I? Yeah, I'll have to read this to you. But so there's, like I said, diffuse, ambient, specular. So specular is how something, like how a light might bounce off a mirror, is kind of specular lighting. This is how if you shined a flashlight on a ball, how the ball might, as a whole, reflect colors that are not necessarily directly associated with where the light hits on it exactly. It's kind of a spread, and that's how we see the light. So at diffuse, we'll make this a certain color. Let's make it red. So there it is kind of over there, it looks like, because one way to deal with lighting and where it's exactly shining is to say where it's looking at. So remember, even though we put a light somewhere, it doesn't necessarily mean it's pointing in the right direction. So in the recital hall, It's not enough to just have a spotlight. You would actually have to focus it on the stage for it to be a one that makes sense. So here we can say look at is an easy way to do this, although there are other ways. And we will say look right at the very center of the stage. So there we have it. So now we're focusing a red spotlight on the entirety of the stage. But it's a little bit too broad, right? We're not really seeing a spotlight. So let's change the spot angle. And I'm going to put this to 40. So now we have a spotlight in the center of the stage. It looks kind of gross, you know, it looks like an Atari, something like that. So one way to deal with that is the spot fall off. So how much does it fall off? And let's give it a value of like 10. And there we go. So now it's a little less terrible. And of course, these things can be changed outside of this area. So I'm gonna just gonna kind of adjust here, try to make things look like I want them to look. Be better to do this with some different arguments. Oh, anyway, I think it was fine before. Great. Okay, and what's interesting is that this actually shines through this plane, which is kind of odd, but that's the way it works. So now we have this sort of thing here. So this grid shape object has some normals to it already, and that allows it to shine the light in certain ways. Let's continue on by making our 3 lights. So I'll make another light, and this one will be positioned to the right, and we'll look, or to the left, and we'll look at the left part of the stage. And whoops, that was a camera. Which you can also do. You can make multiple cameras that will display in the scene, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. Like you've got 2 cameras and they're both going to, let's put this one underneath, you know, the thing. And so there it is, but that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to take this light and duplicate it. So there we go. And I'm gonna move this over to the left. So it's gonna look at the left side of the stage, and it's gonna be located on the left. And I will change its color to be green. So now we have a green and a red light. It looks really terrible right now. And so, sorry. I made it look better in the other one, but I'd have to see how I did it. It was a little bit of trial and error. And finally, the third light, we will put it to look at the right side. So we'll place it over the right part of the stage, and we'll make it look at the right part of the stage. And we will change its color to be blue or yellow. So now it's like a traffic light gone bad. There we go. So there's our 3 pieces of light there. Like I said, this light kind of shines through. So let me see if we can, let's put a handle. We'll put a handle on the grid shape here and just kind of try to look at the bottom of it. So there we can see, I'm terrible at that. Okay, so there's the top of it, and here's the bottom, right? So it's kind of see that there's some light going through there. That's hard to see. And my lights just look really, really wonky. One of the reasons they look really wonky, uh-oh, now I've done it. How did I end up here?
maybe turn off and on the world.
There you go. I think by
Yeah.
resetting the handle, I reset the rotation as well of my plane. So I'm just not going to do that anymore. One of the reasons the light looks really wonky is that there is no interpolation of this diffuse light. So it is if that each little grid of my plane is reflecting light without any reference to what's around it, right? There's no interpolation. And that's what smooth shading should do for my grid shape. So if I were to here turn on smooth shading, I think that this will start to look a little better. So there we go. Now I've blurred it a little bit. Perfect. Okay, so now we have these three lights shining on here, and I'm going to make another one of these grid shapes, and I'm going to position this one below the first. So at position 0, and then down, let's say 3 from that, and still centered on the Y. So there's my second plane. And as you can see, the lights kind of shine through here on this. All right, and I'm going to make a start adjusting things a little bit. I just want to be able to, what in the world? Guess I wish that worked. And so I'm going to make all three of my lights, just change all their spot angles at the same time, just so I can see what that looks like. So wider, like overlap. This is the idea. And then I'll have a spot fall off here. Just so we can see what that does. Yeah. So as we go above a certain point, it says I can't do that. I think that's about 145 where you start losing the ability. All right, so now we've got these things. We've got this plane below the initial plane. We've got lights up here somewhere. Let's make it so that those are at least represented by some object so we can see where they are. That's usually a good strategy. So I'm going to make some grid shapes. You can do it. Light space at shape sphere at scale 0.1 at position, and I'm going to position these where my lights are, because the lights don't show up as an object in the space, they're invisible. So sometimes it's a good idea to have a grid shape so you can kind of see where the light is, can help you orient. So at position, the first one is at 0, 0, 0. Hi, Allison. I'm glad to see you made it so early. And that's not correct. That is at 0, 3, 0. And then this next one is at -1, 3, 0. And then the other one is at +1, 3, 0. And so now I have these three, these are my lights, right? And they're pointing down, as you can see there. And if I wanted to change the position, let's just say on the y-axis of this first light, I could also change the position of this little sphere so that we could see where the light is and the result of the light, right? So we can say like, okay, yeah, I want it to be, right there maybe. So 4 was a better result for that. And then I'll move each light independently. So this one's got to be -1. And the last one, positive one. Move the sphere, move the light. All right, and we'll move all of these to 4. Whoop, 4. Oh, okay, there we go. And now this is looking more like I wanted, I suppose. It is interesting that these lights do shine through, as I mentioned before. So something we can do here is we can put a material on these planes, right? Because right now they're just kind of responding by default of what the grid shape does. Right now I only have sort of a diffuse color for my lights. So let's just see what happens when we put a material on our grid shape. So jit.gl.material. And I might just put the same material on there. So I'm just going to go ahead and connect it. So by doing this, you do put the material on the grid shape. And you'll see that it's responding a little bit differently now, right? And how exactly it responds is determined by double clicking on the material object, right? This is how you work with it, and you get this material editor, which is fantastic, right? I don't have to specify all this in text. And so I could change what the material is here. So here we have a dirt wall material, so we can see where we're shining a light. We can see the dirt wall, or pavement, for instance, or any of these other things. I'll stick with dirt wall for now. No, I'm going to do pavement. And we only have these spotlights right now, so we don't actually have any fill light to see the rest of this, right? We're just kind of limited to these spotlights. So in this case, it may be a good idea to introduce a point light into the scene. So a point light being kind of like a lamp, it's just like emitting light. And it would allow us to position it in some way, which would hopefully allow us to see a little bit more of what's going on besides just these spotlights. But let me pause for a second and see if you have any questions about just this very basic thing.
So I'm sorry if this is already covered, but in setting up the world for this situation, I'm noticing that the planes are like dark. Did you have to set the like ambient light value to like 0 in order to like have this light show up more?
That's a good question. So I think when I introduce a light into the space, I've taken control of the GL lighting scene, right? So there is no ambient light in the world anymore. If I want ambient light, I have to introduce that type of light, so directional light, oddly enough, into the scene. So that's why, and the reason these things look black, right, is that there's no light in the scene besides what I've supplied, which is 3 spotlights. And these things are lighting enabled, so they're like, okay, I'm responding to light. So the normals here are responding to the fact that we are in pitch black, with 3 spotlights trained in a very specific way.
Okay, cool. I wasn't sure because I remember working in like JIT.worlds before. Usually the lighting is just some sort of amorphous ambient thing, but okay.
Right.
It's interesting that Max is like, okay, I'm gonna hold on to this until you're ready to do something with it, and then it's all yours.
Yeah, historically, there did not used to be the ability to do this. So with Max 6 maybe, or something like that, maybe Max 7, I can't remember. It used to be that you would just control the render space's lighting scheme. So, how do you want it to look? And you had that. Now we have this jit.gl.light, which is a newer object, but once you put that in, then you're in control of the whole thing. But you could not introduce the GL light, and I believe still work with the jit.gl.render that exists within the jit.world and control lighting that way, which is kind of what happens when we just don't do anything, right? Things show up and you turn on lighting enable and there's a light somewhere. Like, where's that light? It's in the world by default. Okay, so let's do introduce a point light. Yeah, I'll do that. So I did create a plane that has 3 spots on it, and then I created another plane to show that, and I introduced the material idea. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to introduce it. Yes, yes.
I just want to be sure. So the lights are shining at a point in the world, and the plane happens to be there. It's not. Can you shine it directly at the grid shape?
This spotlight. Well, that's what I'm doing. Is I'm shining it directly at the grid shape.
So if you move the grid shape, the spotlight will automatically move. I guess yeah, because you've set it up that way. But it's not like
no, not necessarily. So right now I set this. Let me try to get rid of some of these wires. Well, not get rid of them. So what's happening right now is that this light actually looks at a certain place. So this middle light is looking at 0, 0, 0.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the way it's shining. That's the direction. If I move the plane, the lights continue to shine in the same spot.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. And I thought about this and I could not come up with the solution. I'm not sure how I would make it so that this would act like a plane normally acts and say, yeah, you probably should not just let things shine right through you. Especially if we have this pavement look. Pavement generally makes light not go ahead and, shine right through it. So
there must be opacity or something.
Well, does the alpha value have anything to do with it?
I don't think so. I could be wrong. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer.
Rigid body?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we don't have any physics on. These planes just float in the world. So anyway, I'm going to skip that for now. And I'm going to go on to what I said I was going to do, which is to introduce a point light into the space.
I'm having a little bit of trouble. Never mind. I'll figure it out.
Okay. All right. So here's our light in light space. I will position it, I guess a little bit closer to this first plane. And I will not have a look at for this. I will not have a color for this. I won't have a spot angle or spot fall off. This will just be a point light. All right, so now I've lit up the space, right? So now there's light in the space that's not pointing at something. It's just kind of there illuminating the space.
Wait, so the light that points is called a spotlight, and the light that doesn't point is called a point light.
Yeah, it's a point source, I guess is a way to think of it. It's just a point of light somewhere. Yeah, and a directional light really isn't directional. It's it's like the sun, which I guess has a direction, but the idea is that, light like we have in my office right now, I don't really know which direction it's coming from. Just kind of lights up. Yeah, so kind of weird nomenclature. But here's our light, and I'll do the same thing here, is that I'm going to have a grid shape that represents this as well. So I'll position it in the same place that I position this point light.
Dr. Thompson, how are you getting the material to, like I'm choosing different materials and they're all like nothing's happening in my world?
Make sure that your planes have, well, I don't know. I'd have to look at your patch.
Did you hook them up?
I did. Yeah, it's just not changing anything, which is kind of weird. It might be something with my planes, like you said.
Yeah, make sure they're rotated negative 90 degrees on the x-axis and not 90 degrees.
Yeah, I think I got that. Have to be floats? No? Yeah, I don't know.
I'll have to look at it. Okay. Anyway, so we have, we're going to move this shape. So now we have this shape here representing the light. And, it's interesting that I don't actually see, there they are. Those are just too high for me to see. And so I'm going to put a position message here. What should we do? Maybe we should move this thing around in a circle or something. So I'll position this light. I'm just going to have to work a little blindly here. Position the light and position the grid shape that is associated with that light. And like I said, maybe move it in a circle because we've been doing a lot of circle stuff. So a sine and a cosine. And I think I want this to be on the X and the Z. So it'll move in a circle around the top of this thing. So there we go. So my position now, the X and the Y will be in a circle. And I'm sorry, X and the Z will be in a circle, but will stay the same distance above the plane on the Y axis. All right, so some sine and cosine, and probably going around with a radius of 1 is fine, I think. And so we'll make a float here. I'm just going to move all this a little further down. There. And we'll pack these values up. And now if all is right with the world, we move around this sort of point light in a circle like this. Well, that's nice. So it's like moving a lamp around the room, I guess is the best way to think about that. Okay. So to go a little further here, we can put a duck in the scene because that's one of the most exciting parts. So it turns out that if you're working in Blender or any 3D modeling program, you can make models. And models are those things that contain the vertices for how the model looks. It should probably contain some sort of stitching matrix about how you're supposed to put it together. And it'll also sometimes contain the normals for how that object reflects light. So that's good. So jit.gl.model in our render space, and at, let's say file maybe, at file duck.dae. So DAE is some type of file associated with a model. And we'll put the duck in the space. So there's a gigantic duck. Its head sticking out of the space. And we can scale the duck. And we can move the duck.
I have a question about the point light.
Yes.
When I made mine with the same settings as yours, it just has totally illuminated everything, and it seems to have no radius to it. Is there a setting or an attribute that allows you to control? Because there doesn't seem to be a point fall off or things like that.
There is an attenuation constant.
Okay.
So there's two things. There's attenuation constant, and that basically just turns down the light. And then there's a linear and quad, right? So as the light moves away from something, how fast does it fall off? I think I would adjust the attenuation constant.
Okay.
Maybe put it to something like 2.6 or something like that.
Seems to do nothing.
That's not good. Okay. Yeah, I can't. I don't know why.
Okay.
All right, so my duck is here, but it's not really seem to respond to the light, right? Because I have not made it respond to the light.
Dr. Thompson?
Yes.
You said DAE for the file type. What does that stand for?
I have no idea.
And
digital, I don't know.
Is that similar to an OBJ file?
Yeah, similar sort of stuff. You know, it's just a file that contains model information, vertices, normals.
And it's scalable too, like it's not a
or
vector based.
That's right. Yeah, if we looked at that file, right, it's probably got, well, if you think about what's in a mesh, right? So we've got a position matrix, a color matrix, a normal matrix, specular array matrix. So all of that sort of stuff is contained within a file like that. And is
I more meant like it's like a vector graphic where you can scale it rather than losing resolution.
Yeah, there's no information in there about the pixels at all. Right. Okay, so we'll rotate this on the y-axis so that the duck can spin.
I figured my thing out.
What was it?
I had put type underscore point, and I guess that confused it and decided that there's light everywhere.
All right, it became a directional light then. Okay, so I'm able to rotate the duck, but like I said, the duck does not seem to reflect any sort of, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. It doesn't seem to reflect any sort of light information, right? Which we want it to. So why doesn't it? Because we did not turn on lighting enable. So I will do that here. Lighting enable 1. And then we'll see, hopefully the duck now is directly under the red spotlight. So there we are. And if we were to look pretty closely at this, we would see that the duck does not have smooth shading on. But I will leave that for a second. So here's our dramatic stage set. The duck is facing this way and then slowly turns around to us and is going to sing "Send in the Clowns." So what we would like to have maybe is another spotlight to shine on the duck, so that maybe it's a white spot, and we can sort of blend these colors and maybe have a different spotlight on the duck that maybe sits at approximately the same space as our camera, right? Or something like that. And we'd always like for this spotlight to shine on the duck, maybe. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is, now I've got all of this crap in my scene, right? I've got grid shapes associated with lights. I've got the planes here. I've got a duck. And I would like to be able to just kind of rotate this freely or move this how I want, right? And to do that right now, I'd have to send a message to every single object, or I'd have to move the world. So this is kind of a long way around to saying I want to introduce this idea of the jit.gl.node. So jit.gl.node does more than what we're about to do with it. For instance, it can capture a whole scene and display it onto a video plane. So you've noticed that that feature in world. So jit.world actually contains a jit.gl.node. Anyway, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to create a, that was interesting. I'm going to create a hierarchy so that I'm going to group these objects. That's what that means. So whatever we connect to here will become part of that hierarchy. And I could not figure out, but I didn't spend a lot of time about how I would do that without having to draw a line to all these objects. So for now, I'm drawing a line to all these objects. Bind to maybe would be appropriate. So here I'm just going to put all of these things onto the node. Let's see here. Got to make sure to get them all. And looks like we missed this one here, maybe. Okay, so now I've attached all of these things, I think, to this node space. Why did I do that? Because now I can rotate this how I would like. So I'm going to rotate this along the x-axis. and I just want to be able to see the scene from different angles. So now it rotates the whole thing. Cool. Anyway, take a look further at jit.gl.node when you have a chance. It's a powerful object, and being able to group things into a hierarchy is sometimes convenient. All right. So now we're going to make another spotlight for the duck. Oh my gosh. So let's move down all of this stuff here. I'll have to redo the wires. This is a very wiry pursuit. So here's another spotlight. And like I said, this time I would like this spotlight to always focus on where the duck is. So as I position the duck, I'm going to train the spotlight upon it. So right now, I just want to look at where the duck is right now, which is 0, 1, 0.
Can we make this duck cast a shadow?
Theoretically, yes. Your mileage may vary at this point. But if you went to the duck and... So why do I say your mileage may vary? Because when I tried this last night, I did something wrong and I wasn't able to make it shine a shadow. So there should be for the shadow center, shadow caster. Yeah, so it's a shadow caster. So it should be shining a shadow now, but there's something else I have to do. So I fail at that. There's a way to do that. You can make objects shine shadows, but I'm not prepared to show that now. Okay. And in fact, that's what I was thinking with this top grid here, this top grid thing is that, I should be able to let it shine a shadow as well. So here's our shadow caster. It doesn't seem to change anything though. And it may be the case that maybe with some of the lights in the space that maybe they have an attribute that would cast shadows. So there we go. So not only does the object itself have to be a shadow caster, but the light itself has to be able to shine a. So this is my point one. So you see that the point is, well, the point is here, and as it moves around, the duck is casting a shadow maybe, and so forth. All right. All right, let me put this back over here, and we're going to shine a light on the duck. And I started doing that, and then I lost my train of thought. So,
Sorry.
okay, this belongs to this. Okay, here we go. All right, so the light and the grid shape associated with it. Oh, that's this one. Did I make this? This is the one right here, right? Okay, sorry. So we're going to position this back. So 0 on the X, but up some on the Y, and then we'll just put it in the same place as the camera, let's say. And it's going to look at where the duck is, which I believe it's already looking at that spot. It's a spotlight. The light will be white, and we'll have to mess with the spot angle and the spot fall off. Okay, and I'll set this position to be the same, which is 0, 5, 8. Okay, and then I want to rotate my space around just so I can find that thing I just made. I don't see it. Oh, maybe it's because it's right where my camera is. Okay, so let me move this forward a little bit. 5. That's odd. I'm just, oh, there it is. Okay, so now we see this gigantic thing is up here. I think maybe, and you know, it doesn't appear to be shining the light like I want it to be. Let's see, so 5, 5. And it should be shining this light at the duck. Still don't see it shining it at the duck. So I've obviously done something wrong. It's not clear what yet. Well, let's just move this position around so we can see where it is. So make a position argument. Let's leave it at 0, and we'll have an argument for y for now, and we'll just leave this a little bit closer to us on the z. And we'll move both the thing and the shape associated with it as well. Scale this back down to something reasonable. All right, and here we go. So now we'll just move it till we see it. There it is. You know, the light itself, oh, because I have to put it into this space here. That was my problem. So it did not belong to that hierarchy, and that created an issue. Okay, so now I have to change a couple things about the light. So the spot angle here is a bit much. And the fall off is probably something I want to have control over. What did we say before? We said 20. Okay, and there we go. So now I can position this where I want. Maybe move it back a little bit on the Z. Yeah. So now we have this the spotlight duck. But wherever this duck moves, right, I would like for it to I would like for the spotlight to follow it, let's say. And there's really no automatic way to do that. You would just have to, because right now, you know, it doesn't follow it. You know, there's nobody operating the spotlight to shine it on the duck. So here we've got this positional information. And let's say that we just say send duck pause. And that's going to be reflected here. So position, 0 point, and then some y value, and then 0 point on the z. And we will receive the duck position here. We will route out the word position. You'll remember from your Max study. And now we will say that what we want to look at is located in that duck position. So every time the duck moves, we will change the look at of this light here. So now as the duck moves up, the spotlight moves, and we can spotlight down on the duck here as he moves to the lower stage and back up. Send in the clouds. So he's got to rotate around and then slowly turn. Cue the music. Yes. All right. So lastly, we might actually get through this whole thing. It's pretty amazing. Lastly, what I'd like to do is the duck stage exists in sort of an infinite space. You know, there's nothing around the duck. So what I'd like to do is make an encompassing sphere. So we'll be in a theater that is a sphere. So let's go ahead, jit.gl.grid shape, light space at shape is a sphere, at lighting enable 1, at scale, let's make it, 5 by 5 by 5, maybe 8 by 8 by 8. And turn on smooth shading. Oh my God, I killed everything. And then put this in the this space. Wow, that's really terrible. That's not what I wanted at all. It just totally killed our scene.
Maybe it's too big and it's taking up your it's totally covering your camera.
I think it's not big enough. I think that I'm actually looking at the sphere. So I'll do 10, 10, and 10, because I do remember that I set my camera at a Z of 8. There we go. So now the sphere is all around us. That spotlight looks pretty funny on that duck right now. It's a little odd, actually. And so now we have this sphere around us. So if we were to, let's see, so let's make sure this, okay, so there's our point light, as we recall, and here's our spot angle for all of these lights. That's right. Those look good. Yeah. Okay, so now what we want to do is let's put a material on the big encompassing sphere. So jit.gl.material on this big sphere here, and we'll change this to be like a dirt wall, which we don't see right now. And the trick here is that we actually have to put a light maybe way back here on the Z to light up the outside of this sphere so that we'll see the dirt wall, strangely enough. So I'm going to make a point light again. This is the one I had before, so point light. And I'm going to position this 0, 0, and then put it like back, I don't know, 11 maybe. I didn't do what I wanted it to do. So I really wanted this to shine through the sphere so we could see it. And I guess I could try to make this directional and see what happens. Oh, I saw it briefly, but I really want a point light here. So let me see what the issue is. I'll try to position this in some way. Nope, not playing ball with us today. So let's see here. This should be obvious already, but yeah, and so I'm failing at this last part here. It's too bad. Because what I want to have happen is for the sphere to show this dirt wall. There it is. It's on the other side. Oh, I put the Z in the wrong position. We're actually facing the negative Z, so I have to put this way. There we go. And depending on where I put that outside of the sphere, it's going to kind of light up more of the sphere or less of the sphere, right? Strangely. If I put it inside the sphere, it tends to shine back toward the origin. It's just how that point light works. So there we go. That's what I want. So now we're in a dirt cave. We have the ability to sort of move the whole scene here to look at what's going on. And so the cinematographer brings in the scene. The duck is turned this way. Okay. Cinematographer brings in the scene. Start scene, and then I automate this to rotate around slowly. And then we cue send in the clowns, and the duck sings that. All right, so that is the that was the brief introduction to lights, OpenGL in Jitter, with a couple things introduced in addition. One being the jit.gl.node, which becomes quite powerful. That is the way we're able to easily get textures out of the world for post-processing, for example. But jit.gl.node can do that automatically. Also, by some sort of weird coincidence, right? I showed you that you can also have multiple cameras in the scene, which is a little weird, honestly, because we're not used to seeing two cameras projected on top of each other when we watch something. We tend to just choose to watch one camera at a time, but you could do that. We see the different types of lighting here. We didn't really go into too much about specular details of stuff. So for instance, if I were to jump into this material for the sphere, I can change various things about that. I could choose to do a different type of model with different specular and diffuse lightings, but I chose this. I could choose to change different sort of things within this to see if it makes a difference for me. You know, we have all these different options that just kind of work in a very user-friendly way. You can preview this on various things, like maybe it makes the most sense to preview it on this. And you can import materials. All right. And that is that for today. So remember that you're supposed to be working on a final project of some sort, which would ideally incorporate and would make an audio-visual thing, right? So here we have avoided, besides me implying that Send in the Clowns will be played, we've avoided any sort of audio, and we just worked on an OpenGL lighting scene, which for me, honestly, is not the way I would normally work. I'm not totally interested in trying to create a scene like this, and I think there's better programs for creating scenes kind of like this. But for having lights that move around a scene dynamically or maybe respond to sound, this is a very good program for doing things like that. There's nothing stopping you from putting lights into your scene and making it a little bit better than the default. That being said, oftentimes when I make a work, I don't bother with this part of it. Because I can often get similar effects in different ways. But it may be something that lights up a part of your brain that says, I really want to do that. I know that many of you did not get success with getting materials on stuff, and there were various problems, but I'll just encourage you to continue working on that to try to make it so that you could do a scene like this. So for example, to be able to make a plane where 3 spotlights shine down on it in different colors is a good idea. All right, so with that, I will let you guys go. Are there any questions?
Can you upload sprites and have simple animation?
Yeah, I have a similar question. Like, how do you get into animating like facial things on the duck or something?
Yeah, so that would require, I don't know. Let me preface that. I don't know. That would require sort of a skeletal model, I think. That's a little bit beyond me, but when we get into the physics engine and we look at constraints and things like that, then maybe we could look at that. I'm not sure this model has much of an ability to manipulate that particular aspect. I'm not sure, because all this model is right now is just a bunch of vertices. So which ones correspond to the beak is questionable.
So like with that, you would have to like Dr. Thompson said, you would probably have to like figure out some sort of skeletal structure, like figure out bones for this thing. And then on top of that, you would also have to do some sort of rigging system.
Right. Yeah, you need some joints.
Weighting things to those bones. So I'm not sure if Max, I mean, maybe Max has that capability.
It's not the best program for that, but it is possible.
But it could work. I'm just wondering even what would be, because then maybe they could work together well. I was thinking Blender would be able to do something like this, but
yeah. I think that's, I mean, I would not try to model anything in Max necessarily. It's not really meant for that. You can do that. I've seen people do that, but I mean, it's like, why wouldn't you just use Maya or Blender or something and create your models that way? I'm not totally informed about how to take a rigged model from a 3D program and bring it into Max, but I have seen it done. So it's possible. What we'll cover is more about creating constraints and hinges and things like that in a 3D world, and being able to create sort of causal events and hopefully map those to some sort of messaging that could create sound. But we reach a territory at some point here where programs that this becomes not the best program for the things we're talking about. So something like Unity is very good for creating scenes that are quasi-realistic or have these sort of physics engine things happening that can be real time, but it has a different sort of feel to it. And how would you do the sort of things we do in Max interactively in Unity? It's possible, but then I say, well, that's not really the best program for that. Max is the best program for this sort of interactive musical, visual music sort of idea of things, whereas other programs are better tools for even doing what we just did. I mean, this is nice because it's interactive and easy to open up to lots of different things. But I wouldn't say that this is the primary focus of a program like this. Maybe not the best tool for that job. That being said, you can model anything in any program and bring in the models into Max for the sort of real-time sort of musical feel, I would call it, that this program has. Good question, though. And I'm not totally sure the answer, except to say that there are things in the physics engine like hinges and so forth. But that information would have to be embedded in the model if we were to bring it from somewhere else and then hope to make this duck talk, right? And I don't think this model includes that sort of information, that we could hinge the jaw and make it go up and down. That would be nice. All right, with that, we've reached our time. I will post this video. I will try to get your midterms graded. And the rest I'll save for some other time. Thank you guys, and I will end